Hello, friends. How are you today? Today I have a fascinating video for you and an important message that I want to share with you. And I would like to ask you guys, if any of you are researchers, please make a copy of this video and even the last one, a warning for humanity, because I talked about this topic. I began talking about it in the last video. So if you haven't seen the last video, in which I talked about these, I called them microfibril striations that I saw on the Schumann resonance. In that video, I gave the whole rationale for why what I was seeing made sense from my perspective and how the whole thing came together. So that's kind of important because it underlies the next thing I want to talk to you about, which is these interesting codes. The codes are on the chart for today, the 14th of October. They're right here. And I pointed these out in my last video. So I did talk about them and the fact that they seem to be inserted into the data. And when I say inserted, what I mean is that a transmission that is picked up by the machinery that is picking up the frequencies. In other words, this pattern, in my view, was not created by changes in frequencies, amplitudes, or qualities. So, like in a natural way, right? That's how these patterns get created, by changes in those things and perhaps other characteristics that we either don't know about, or perhaps other characteristics are analyzed. I don't know, but I feel that there's got to be other characteristics that are come together to make the chart. I've talked about that before, but what I want to focus on today is that in looking at that, it's possible that this is a transmission from an outside source, okay? Now, it's also possible that we are transmitting this to ourselves. And the discussion I had on the video yesterday also provides a rationale for this concept on the Schumann resonance, because the Schumann resonance, in a quick thumbnail, is in a range of 0 to 40 plus hertz, which is the same range of hertz as human brain waves. It's also an electromagnetic energy, and human beings generate electromagnetic energy. So that is why, and I tied this all together in the last video, that I view this as a reflection of human consciousness. And in fact, however it came to be on the chart, I feel that our own human consciousness is attempting to tell us something, and maybe even assist us in providing a solution to some of the travails that we have at the moment. Particularly today, we're going to particularly talk about body and health perspective. Now, some of these striations that I talked about on the last video are still on the chart here. And what I wanted to clearly say, what I went through on the last video, how these are a reflection, in my view, that it is showing myofibril striations, which is changes in muscle movement at a very, very small level. And I showed images in the last video, but it's almost like the human body is calling out to us, right? Because it's part of what is generating the EM field and our brains. And so the fact that we're generating a field at all is a subconscious activity. We do conscious thinking, but there's so much that we see and perceive that is kind of beyond our grasp to often to describe in the moment. And so in that way, it's my view that divinity flows through us in sort of in a beautiful tapestry of energy flowing through the human that is showing up on this chart and we are giving ourselves messages, and there's specific codes. So the message of these myofibril striations, in my view, was that the mitochondria that assist these very small movements, because without the mitochondria, cells wouldn't have the energy to function. So these tiny, tiny mitochondria are at the basis of human life. And if they are being negatively affected, it is a big deal. So now, I think that these codes are going to reveal the next level of the puzzle. And that's why I want to talk with you about this. It's very important in my view. But first, if you could share this video if it resonates with you, and also like and subscribe to my channel, that would be wonderful. I'm also running I'm calling it the Crystal Fair Celebration through this Saturday, where I'm giving reduced rates on my sessions that I do, because I didn't physically go to the fair this year, and it's just been so wonderful to meet a number of you, and it's just been an absolute delight. So thank you guys who've participated, and you're welcome to still contact me. If you're on the newsletter, there's a link below, or you get onto the newsletter, then you have availability. And when you get the welcome letter, there will be a link to the information on the sessions after you sign up. Now, if you know someone who can understand what I'm talking about, who's in the scientific community where they're researching this and looking for answers, if you could please get this information to if you have a personal contact or way of doing that, I'm asking you to please share this information that I'm going to share with you, because I think I think they might find it interesting. So in the last video, I described that what I saw here was a T23 and a P53. Okay, and my friend Alex and I collaborated on the last video because she has a biology background, so she explained aspects of that, of what I was perceiving, and she gave me the biology pieces because I perceived the striations and the communication of a message. But she knew about myofibril striations and a lot of other things that are relevant to this video. So I consulted her again on the video, and thank you, Alex. There's someone else that I want to thank, and that's JDB Nola. You made an awesome, incredible comment on my last video, and I'm going to just summarize that for you guys, for the listeners here. But thank you so much. This this was just like so incredible. Thank you for sharing it. After I mentioned the code that I saw in the chart, this person messaged me and said that it struck them to look up TP53 in regards to DNA, because 23 is the number of chromosomes in humans. So according to Wikipedia, the human TP3 gene has been described as the guardian of the genome because of its role in conserving stability by preventing genome mutation. It's key in DNA damage and repair. P53 plays a role in regulation and progression through the cell cycle. It can activate DNA repair proteins when the DNA has sustained damage. It can take a cell that's damaged and help the cell change into a healthy cell. And if the cell is not recoverable, it essentially initiates the death of that cell so that there's not further damage that occurs, so that that cell can be moved out. And there is a connection between what's called cellular senescence and telomeres and this and TP53. So it's like really important. So it's my feeling that JDB Nola was correct. And it's funny, when I mentioned it to Alex, she said yes, she saw the 23, and obviously it occurred to her that related to DNA. But once I gave her the information from the comment, she just went and started digging. So I'm going to share the results of that with you now. So one of the key aspects of gene TP53, it's responsible for creating this protein P53. And here's a key aspect of it. It suppresses tumors and cancer. So scientists have been doing research with synthetic nanoparticles of P53 and mRNA to increase cancer suppression in individuals who have a gene TP53 mutation, so that their cells, the mutation is that their cells are null of P53. What that means is if the cells are null, cancer can spread more rapidly, and the cells don't have the ability to fight against cancer in the same way as someone who has I'll just call it a perfect gene TP53, that is TP53, that's able to create the P53 protein. So here's the thing. On my last video, I talked about this, that something that is used as a positive can also be used as a negative, and something used as a negative could be a positive, because I have intuited that something about the technology that's being used, that's going into people's bodies, something about it is able to assess weaknesses in cells of the specific human. And I think that we've now nailed one aspect of this, because the increased spread and growth of cancers is a key issue at the moment, from videos I've seen. And here's the thing. If you can create the ability with synthetic nanoparticles of P353 and mRNA, okay, to give that to a cell so that the cell can now heal itself of cancer, couldn't you also create nanoparticles of a substance and mRNA? Could you do it? And I'm just going to invoke a prayer here and a sacred flame over this energy, because it's horrendous. So I'm just going to say that prayer here and ask that this be transmuted. I'm going to use a violet flame back to a state of neutral and unconditional love. Here's what I wanted to say. If it was possible to create this for healing, wouldn't it be possible to create synthetic nanoparticles of something related to P53, maybe a locator, and mRNA, to remove the P53 from the TP53 gene, or remove the ability to create that, which would rapidly increase the spread of cancer? Maybe this is just our natural defense, and if that's taken away, then mutations in cells start to spread. So this is a key thing. And like I said, if any of you know people who are working on these issues, it would be wonderful to share this possibility, because if you have an idea of what might be happening, then you can figure out how to solve it. So I wanted to show you something else here. See these lines, and see these lines that came with, in between, the letters, the T and the P, and the 23 and the 53, okay? I looked at these and I started to think, I wonder if there's a pattern. And then I thought, I'm going to go and see if there's any patterns related to this gene, PT53, that look anything like this. And it's interesting because there's also been these long lines, and we've seen them before in the chart, and they've now appeared again after the return of the data, because there was no data for, 2 to 3 days. Well, let me show you something. So this is from Wikipedia, and they're calling this gene tiger. Okay, so when you see the image, that's what it's referring to. It's a shortcut name for this. So take a look at this. Okay, I thought that this was interesting. I just wanted to share this picture with you. I don't know if this is showing up in anything that scientists are looking at this structure, but I just wanted to share it with you. And here's the next thing I wanted to share with you. Here you have the P53 protein structure. That's the protein generated by this TP53 gene. Now look at this. See this here? Do you see the components put together? Well, if you turn these on their, if you lifted them up so that it was up and down, to me it looks a lot like, it could look a lot like this. Like these here. Okay? So here's what I'm wondering. If someone who understood this area, this field, looked at these patterns, would these patterns tell us what the mechanism here is to solve this problem? Okay, the problem of the T53 being potentially removed from human cells. Is there some code in here that gives us a formula, a formula that would relate to the structure of this protein? That's what I'm wondering. And since I'm an out-of-the-box thinker, it makes sense to me. And I hope that it might make sense to someone else. So what I'm wondering is, are these vertical lines showing us what part of this protein structure potentially is being affected? Or if there's some way to, if it's showing us pieces of this protein structure that have been affected or that could be worked with to reverse the process, that if the process has been initiated, okay, genetically, then are we showing ourselves through the map of human consciousness that I'm calling it a map of human consciousness, the Schumann resonance? Are we showing ourselves subconsciously, projecting it onto the screen, this TV screen of human consciousness? Are we showing ourselves how to solve this medical problem? So friends, I appreciate you listening. And the last thing that I want to mention is that the Schumann does appear to contain codes, and I would call these human codes, codes and messages that we give to ourselves and that we transmit into the greater consciousness that is the energetic soup that we participate in, swim in, co-create together, and co-create with the divinity within us in as well, in my view. And the fact that there could be codes on the chart, it doesn't surprise me because I have seen it before. This is the first time I have talked about it in detail. But there was a very significant event 20 years ago that I have seen the codes and literally that date written in the Schumann in visible numbers in letters. It's been absolutely fascinating. And I think that there's probably more that could be done with this. And more analysis that could be done if someone really had the data and the ability to really manipulate the charts and the images. And when I say manipulate, I mean really look into what, like the pixels coming together and the images that they're creating together. Now, there's also the idea of relying on our intuition, our God-given sense of intuition and of our own knowing. Because as soon as I looked at this chart, the word striation came up, and I started to look up all of the different kinds of striation and what that word means. Glacial striation. Just the fact that something could scrape against something and create and leave an imprint. And then we got to, and when I showed this to Alex, we got to muscular striation of the myofibrils. And that led to the idea about the mitochondria present in all muscle fibers. And I have mentioned the mitochondria before on another video. But let me tell you now that in December, the reason that we focused in on mitochondria in addition is because I have seen it on the Schumann chart before. And in December, there were images in 2019 that occurred onto the Schumann chart, and I called it the story of creation. I didn't put this video out at the time because there was just so much drama happening. And because people I knew were sick who were involved in me getting this out, information out, and some other things. So, but I saw the mitochondria, and Alex and I at that time had a big discussion about mitochondria, and that's why. So watching the images that come through the Schumann over time, okay, it's like a story that builds, and there's repeating themes. And December 2019 was a very important time, right? Because it was sort of the gateway before life, started changing, and the various events that have happened the past couple of years have occurred. So the other thing about the muscle fibers that Alex mentioned to me was, it's interesting because the mitochondria are present in all types of muscle fibers. And it's interesting because, it raises the question, is something about this current medical process that we're all witnessing and in some cases experiencing in large numbers, is this messing with the energy production in muscles, including cardiac muscles? That's a very interesting question. So again, if you know someone who can take these thoughts and use them for good, then please share them. And thank you so much for listening today.